excited for this conversation because I've been talking a lot about abundance and the idea that abundance is really a mindset. And I came from like no money at all and was very much raised with that idea that like there's never enough and that worry and that stress. And I realized that like it's more about a state of being, that when we constantly have the mindset that there's not enough and that we're not enough or something's always missing, we create more and more of it. And I know both of you have been in the cryptocurrency world, and you've been in it for like 3 years now. And I thought the cryptocurrency issue is an important part of this conversation, which you guys introduced me to, because a lot of people believe like, oh, well, it's freeing us from the money system. But I know it's more complicated than that, because the issue is still the mindset. The issue is still the resonance and having the mindset of abundance. So I wanted to talk to you guys because, first of all, I want to hear about both of your experiences in the cryptocurrency world, and also I know both of you are very, very much a part of the abundance conversation, like the idea that it's about consciousness and it's about really a lifestyle and, like I said, a resonance. So yeah, I just want to hear from you guys, especially like just your background, both of you, like where you're interested in, not just cryptocurrencies, but abundance in general, what you think about what it means to be abundant. You were talking earlier about being wealthy on every level, not just financially. So yeah, which one of you want to start?
Yeah, I'm really glad that we get to have this conversation. It's really prevalent in my life right now. Cryptos, we can take the state of the space that we're in our traditional fiat, and look at it as, it's a reflection of our internal. So each of us internally, the collective consciousness, it's being mirrored at our current state. Mm-hmm. So, which is being driven by greed and fear. And if we want to perpetuate that cycle and that system of competitiveness, then it'll just exacerbate and be ported into the blockchain and cryptocurrency space.
So when you say like the competition and the fear, like speak a little bit about the business world in that sense, because I know it's very much been about competition and like it's kind of become like a dog eats dog world. Not become, it's kind of been that way for a long time. So what?
Well, it's not just business. It's everything. It's our entire existence.
Exactly,
it's like we're constantly competing against each other for survival. And if you look at nature and the codes in nature and how nature is in harmony with everything, we're the only beings on the planet at this time that aren't in harmony with each other and the rest of the planet.
Yeah.
Nature is a cooperative, collaborative being, and we are disharmonized, dysfunctional, so to say, competitive beings where competition in the 1700s wasn't looked at as, I'm going to go out and do this for me and hoard. Competition was a good thing. It was we're all working together and striving for one goal. Mm-hmm. So that has shifted in our society drastically, and I think the important thing is for us to all be aware of, yes, there's this great new thing, cryptocurrency and the blockchain technology, and it has the ability to be pervasive in all of our lives and change and shift our current state. But the only way that that's going to happen is if we each individually change on the inside. Mm-hmm. And really going in and looking at what is that. And then, as you always talk about, the lack matrix and the abundance matrix, that's what it is. It's this dualistic idea of, light and dark, black and white, but
very limited options.
Yeah. But and that's what I love about the blockchain is that it's the fabric. It literally is the fabric of creation. It's the matrix. It's binary. It's ones and zeros. So there are algorithms, cryptographically secured form of value, and at its core, it is ones and zeros. Everything comes down to this like dualistic idea, right? Mm-hmm. So being aware of that and then choosing the state that we want to be in.
Yeah. So I know you said you've been involved in cryptocurrencies in that world for like the last 3 years, and like speak a little bit to what it was and what's happening to it and like how you feel like it's influencing the abundance matrix versus the lack matrix?
So the Satoshi white paper was released in 2009, and the idea was that we could get away from the state being connected to our currency, and dismantling those two from each other would allow freedom. And the Satoshi, the group, the anonymous group of people that created the blockchain, Bitcoin was a predecessor, I guess, of that creation, and it allowed an application for the blockchain. At the time, it was being used as a currency. There's only 21 million in supply, so having a visible, provable form of scarcity, whereas in our current system, fiat is easily manipulated. So this scarcity is all an illusion. Same with diamonds, same with anything that we create. Well, here, it's not an illusion. It's there. This is, and now we can see it wasn't created as a currency. It was created as a store of value, to incentivize people to get and move into this space and start generating new ideas and creating new things in the space.
So how do you feel like that translates? I know you and I have talked about this before, like the idea that it's kind of a reflection of an internal state of being, you know, like the idea of getting free from the money system, so to speak, as it's been, is really a reflection of the idea that at our core level, we're electromagnetic, and we are always emitting energy and magnetizing energy, and that's based on our thoughts and emotions. And that is actually how the real transaction happens. And money, any system, is a reflection of that. And I know you and I have had that conversation. Like, I would like to hear you speak a little bit, kind of things you told me before about that sort of idea about what abundance is at the core level.
So I'm going to start by saying Megan and I have been amazing friends for a long time, and one of the reasons I was able to understand cryptocurrencies as well is because of her involvement in it. However, my real interest in cryptocurrency is that I got my degree in consciousness and human evolution.
Oh, interesting.
So I've been doing personal development work and really just studying people and consciousness for a long time. And when blockchain, Bitcoin started to come to my awareness, I literally, and I saw it as a bubble, not a bubble like everyone's talking about, you know, the internet, you know, .com was a bubble and Bitcoin's a bubble and looking at prices, but a bubble as sort of this birthing between technology and consciousness that allowed a whole new reality to start seeding itself into our awareness. With that being said, blockchain is a technology, and this is what you're starting with. Money is a technology. So what we're noticing, and a message that I have seen repeated for years now that's becoming more prevalent, is that if humanity doesn't master its own technology, like the technology of literally every single deep esoteric teaching says, know thyself. What does it mean to become the master of ourselves? If we don't become the master of ourselves, then the technology can destroy us, because it has the ability to replicate so quickly, to destroy. If we're going to not have the structures and the ethics of how we're using our resources, we can cut all the trees down that much faster. So, and that's just, I look at that because I'm obsessed with consciousness, is how is consciousness evolving and replicating itself? Things are speeding up, so consciousness itself, if we look at it separate from even humanity, how is it exploring itself?
Right.
So with that being said, we're stepping into this time when people talk about the singularity, or we start talking about AIs, where consciousness is starting to explore itself beyond human experience. And humans have the tendency to put themselves above everything else. And that's when Megan's talking about us being out of alignment with nature, where nature is this holistic organism. And that's not all humans. There are definitely humans that still live on this planet that see themselves as an intricate part. They're not more concerned with the human story than they are with the butterfly story or the plant kingdom story. And that's why they have a more intimate relationship with the plant kingdoms and the mineral kingdoms. That's why they're able to talk to the plant spirits and understand the plant medicines. So when I look at the more transcendent picture, I look at how is consciousness evolving. And cryptocurrency and blockchain is fascinating because we've been in a vertical pyramidal structure,
Mm-hmm.
and now blockchains allows us to be decentralized
Yes.
and to
Or
spread that.
centralized.
Or
That's
centralized.
another part of the conversation
Yeah.
that definitely has to be had, is that it's not just decentralized, it's centralized and distributed. And there are many different ways in which this technology can be used for higher good or for not higher good.
Right.
But in my opinion, it's just a tool. Like it's, you know, we can look at it as this big thing that's being birthed into the planet, but at the same time, it's just a tool to bring us back to ourselves and look at it like, you know, for me, when I see these huge, massive numbers and I get all excited, it really brings me back to my humanity and back to like the essence, the core divinity of who we are and what we are.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just another tool to remind us to go back into that space and to create from that space.
Yeah, and I would love to hear if you want to share the experience in Guatemala that you had and what happened right after when you had that awareness that abundance was coming, or wealth was coming into your life, or that you were wealthy at a multiple levels. You know, at multiple levels. I'd love to hear that. I know you had quite an experience in Guatemala too, so I'd love to hear.
Sure.
how that
Yeah.
was.
So prior to last year, Nada and I went to Las Pyramidas del Cabo, which is on Lake Catalan in Guatemala. Very beautiful, very powerful portal energy around the lake. And prior to the trip, I was involved in the space, investing, but it wasn't my entire life. And while I was on the lake, and you know, we did a lot of meditation and breath work, and I was just being showed that my life is going to change, things are going to shift, and I'm going to be involved in a different space, and my purpose here on this planet and what I'm going to be doing is going to be redirected and refocused. And I got really scared because I didn't know what that was going to be. And when we left the lake, going back through the airport, we were standing in line in security, and I'm just on my phone, and I have this, from the bottom of my feet all the way to the top of my head, very tangible, powerful feeling of wealth. And when I say wealth, I mean like physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. My entire being just felt like full and abundant and wealthy and joyful and happy. And it lasted for a few seconds, and then I thought, what in the world was that? That was like crazy. And as I was processing it, I thought, okay, well, maybe it's my ego, or maybe it's because we spent so much time in a place of non-material, just with the codes of nature, and then we're in this airport with all these materialistic things. And I thought, no, it's something else. So I started looking through my phone at, you know, bank accounts and spreadsheets, and as soon as I pulled my crypto accounts up, this is when Ethereum had shot from, I don't know, like $7 or $8 to like 42 in the time period that we were in Guatemala.
Wow.
So I really truly believe that the work that we did there, I had a quantum leap, I had a jump and a shift, and it really showed me what that feeling is and what it means to be really wealthy. And after getting back to LA from our flight home, I got down and I prayed and I said, okay, what am I going to be doing? What does this mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I stopped everything and I went full force into the crypto space, and I've dedicated every waking second of my existence to the space.
Wow.
Learning and teaching and investing and growing and expanding, and now learning that, and then finding you through Nada, which is amazing, and really bringing the difference between the lack and the abundance matrix into my consciousness and awareness, and embodying that. I see that taking what I call, when I speak about cryptos, a vow of wealth. Mm-hmm. A lot of people in this space now are taking a vow of poverty, mm-hmm. because they don't want to have a tax liability. And I think we need to shift in order to shift into a new paradigm and what we want to create, really taking a vow of wealth, each of us, on every single level.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's one of the things that I feel really passionate about, is that when we're abundant, the idea of abundance at the core level is that all of our needs can be met. We don't bypass any need. Whereas when we're in lack, I know you and I have talked about this too, like when we have a lack mindset, the idea is that there's not enough, and so some aspect of us is always bypassed. Whether it's our mind, our heart, or our body, or something is always bypassed because there's never enough. And the stronger we believe that, it creates, because it's proven that our species is connected, every species is connected, so we are co-creating, and the more of us that think a certain way, the stronger that matrix becomes. And it's also been proven that, well, I don't know if proven is the right word, but I've read a lot of quantum physics theories about how the kind of subconscious computer of all humans can be changed when we individually go in and change our own subconscious or activate it and awaken it. So as each person takes a vow of abundance, I love that, by the way, like a vow of abundance, because you hear like in the spiritual world, the vow of poverty.
Yeah, and it's really about, the past few months I've been able to, as working with this concept, I see where my superconscious, my subconscious, and my conscious mind work together. Mm-hmm. And whenever I get the old programmings, even in work, as much as I'm really fortunate to be surrounded by early adopters in the space that have a true vision for where we're going, there still are people that are stuck in that greed, lack, competition space, and that's okay. And when it comes up, or even if I find it in myself, I take it from my conscious or my subconscious mind, and I just hand it over to my superconscious, the higher God itself inside. So
I like that.
Working through that methodology has really helped shift a lot in me, and I find that the more I do it and embody that, the more everyone around me does too. It's a reflection.
Totally. And go ahead.
Well, I want to speak actually to that more specifically also, because what I'm seeing happen is, and when we talk about human technology and shifting our perspective, which is what you're talking about, Megan, whether we're using a dollar bill or we're using a Bitcoin or we're using Ethereum or we're using Litecoin, if we don't shift our perspective, we're literally playing the same game.
Exactly.
Well, and we should also talk about the fact that these aren't currencies. So like not as saying whether we use these, they're not actually currencies. Bitcoin, as a store of value, a store of gold, you wouldn't use them as currencies. You're actually voting into a community. You're using, and like how you buy food or you put things in your body, I know Nada and I are pretty conscious about those things. We'll look at ingredients and decide, okay, yes or no. The same thing with buying into or investing into a crypto. They're all different, and each one has their own attributes, and it's literally a vote. Just how we're using our fiat currency to vote for things, you're using your money to buy into a community. And the Satoshi future really is distributed, autonomous communities, and where there's no central point of humanity controlling these things.
So I agree with what you're saying, and I think it's really important that people hear that, because what I'm seeing is a lot of people still using the old system and bringing that into how they're interacting with cryptocurrencies. For example, I have a friend who lives in San Francisco, and she was telling me she literally cannot walk down the street without hearing conversation of someone saying, I should have gotten at this point, if only I had gotten in this point, if I bought like last week when it went down, but now it's gone back up, which is everyone still replaying the scarcity model. And the cool thing about it is that it's coming, if we actually are having these conscious discussions, we can look at how embedded that model is into our being. And to take it a step further, looking at how, the way that I look at it is when we talk about worshiping false idols, we live in a culture that worships money. We have dissociated our own connection to source and given it over to an externalization represented in money. And for many people still represented in Bitcoin, because they see it as a way that they can make more money.
Right.
Most people, and the reason that I love the cryptocurrency circuit and the community is because there are some incredible beings, I call them purists. And how I got introduced into it was by an amazing woman named Victoria, who taught me about how the economic system worked and how debt works. And I mean, that's a whole other discussion that we can go into. But really popped my bubble and opened my eyes to how enslaved we all are by the system, and how it's very deliberately created that way.
Right.
And when peer-to-peer value exchange came on to the market, and I believe that Satoshi, the group of beings, the entity, the consciousness, whatever it was that breathed Bitcoin and blockchain into our reality, was seeded with the intention of giving us an option besides centralized power. And there are many people who still passionately believe that, And then there's also a lot, and there's a lot of people that originally started it. Now as it's spread, there's a lot of people jumping in purely out of scarcity because they are afraid. They're seeing so many people make millions of dollars that got in early and they want to make money. So they're jumping on their next coin. They're not researching who's behind that coin. They're not even understanding. So for our vote to be conscious and not be embedded in the old system of I'm just doing this because I think money's what's going to be my survival. I've totally disconnected from my source. I've given my ability to create to an externalized representation, which could be a dollar bill or a digital number in your bank account or whatever that looks like. Until we disconnect from that, we can't fully move into the wealth consciousness that Megan's talking about because we're literally enslaved by our scarcity and our fear of death, which it's like pulling people along on this fishing pole or puppets or however you want it.
Exactly.
And that's okay. Like I always say, like, this is a new slate for us, and these conversations that we're having now, and more people are having them around the world because they see it just as I see it, as this is a new slate, it's a new opportunity. It's really the shift for the evolution of our consciousness, where this tool, it's one tool that we get to look at. It's becoming prevalent all over the globe. You hear about it, everyone knows about it now. We get to use this tool as a new leaf, and start looking at, okay, what do we want to create? How do we want to create it? How do we want this system to be in harmony with us?
So what do you guys think the solution to that is, to not just playing the same game in a new world, like in a new crypto
all
world?
Inside of each of us. The answers, and we can sit and have conversations and embody and teach people, but the answers are really inside of each one of us, and going inside and doing the work, the answers are in each one of us. They're not outside. When people ask me, what should I do? What should I do? I tell them, go inside of yourself. You have the answers. Spirit can guide and lead you. Just go inside and follow that. And once we're all doing that and living in harmony with that higher consciousness and that state, it'll be heaven on earth. We can literally create heaven on earth.
Exactly. That's what I feel super passionate about, that heaven on earth is a state of mind, and hell is a state of mind. And hell, really, the core of hell is lack, and the core of heaven is abundance. And so it doesn't make any sense. I feel like in the spiritual community for years, it's been this idea that not to want, not to have, not to desire, that's somehow holy or spiritual. But I think that's actually done a disservice to what the whole point is, which is thriving. And you can't thrive without your whole heart. And I think the heart is really in my mind, the heart is the center of it all. And I talk a lot about, like, we have to have our whole, fully restored hearts. And because a lot of us have been broken, we've been in a broken system. Like you brought up survival and death. Like, people are afraid of death and they've been in survival mode. We've been deeply programmed with that, and we've been deeply programmed with competition and war. Only some people can be good, only some people can win, only some people can have, because there's not enough. So it even goes deep down into the consciousness in terms of worthiness. Like, we even do it to ourselves every day. I'm not going to do this because I don't feel worthy, and until I prove to myself that I'm worthy, I'm not going to have abundance. Like, we put all of these ideas about what we're allowed to have based on a sense of worthiness, which comes from lack. And we have to somehow overcome that idea that we're not worthy. And I really believe it's, on some level, it's about really loving and embracing our humanity. Like, it's all about our humanity, and it's about empathy, and it's about the heart, and it's about remembering that we're all connected. We're not trying to prove that we're above humanity or above whatever we are. I feel like it's about actually connecting to what we are, and realizing that we're vulnerable, and that we're limited in the sense that we're in limited bodies, but
and our perceptions.
Exactly.
These are all just constructs of our own minds. This is all an illusion. Whenever I get so excited sometimes, I'm like, yay, like all the wealth and the abundance, it's so exciting. And then I think, oh, I've always had this. I've always had this, even though I'm seeing it on a screen in physical reality. I've always had it, and you have it, and you have it, we all have it.
Exactly.
And just coming back and knowing, I think the trick is remembering when you catch yourself in that like lack pattern of, oh, hey, this is the limitation of my human brain. This is not who I really am. And I have access to all of this abundance in the vow of wealth.
I love the vow of wealth. That's so
great.
That's so great. I just love that. So I want to hear more, like, you were kind of going down that road as well, like the idea of a mindset, and like what's been your experience in that way. I don't really know in terms of your background and what brought you into it. Like, I don't know if you talked about that.
I want to say one thing.
Yeah.
I like when the word wealth has we in it. I like, I want to, it's one thing that you've said, and I've seen some of your videos and that we've talked about, is the concept of loving everything.
Yes.
Because I do, and Megan and I have talked about this, it really comes down first and foremost to loving yourself on every level and loving every part of your humanity.
Yes.
And then when you talk about us being interconnected, there are definitely states of consciousness when we talk about perspective, and if people who have meditated, or if you've done any kind of hallucinogenic, plant medicines, you can experience different states of consciousness, and there's definitely a state of consciousness, and if you practice it, you can hold it where you experience yourself in unity with all things. But for those people who maybe aren't as practiced or haven't had exposure to that, it doesn't have to be this sort of philosophical idea of we're all one, because the connectedness comes in literally the way that we're here talking today. Megan and I got connected through a friend of mine's, had a raffle, and I was offering sessions, and Megan won the raffle, and we became friends. And then I was meditating, maybe 6 months ago, and for the last year I've been getting these downloads, and I wasn't sure exactly what was coming through, and then I just came upon your video on YouTube, and you were speaking so precisely in such a grounded way to my experience. I realized I'm not making this up.
Right.
This is actually real. There's somebody else having this experience. So I reached out and I contacted you.
Right.
And now, boom, 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 the three of us are here. So there's a very real, tangible aspect of the connectedness that's happening, and it's essential to creating the networks. When we get into like cryptocurrency, and I just, my boyfriend has a cryptocurrency and a community that's very based in like bringing the consciousness to the planet. He was speaking yesterday about how mesh networks and satellites and different ways of creating the networks of these technologies. It's so important that we remember the network of our humanity.
Yes, exactly.
And I think of it, the best visualization is like if we both are holding hands, there are going to be times when you're going to have the scarcity come up or the fear come up, and you may not be able to control your resonance enough to go into the walk through the abundance.
Totally.
And like Megan and I have been able to be this for each other as friends, where I think I'm maybe not feeling that great about myself, or I don't feel as connected to source, or my faith isn't so strong that I believe everything's going to work out okay.
Right.
And that's when you have your team, and I call you up, or I call Megan up and I say, I'm terrified, this is coming up for me. And if you're in that abundance or wealth vibration, it's very easy for you to pull me back up to there, especially if I've already committed. And this is where the vow comes in. If I've made a commitment to myself and an intention to live in love and win-win, and that when I start to go and get pulled into the other vibration, I can, if I'm not strong enough to do it on my own, I reach out to my network.
I love that.
And that's the concept of critical mass.
Yes.
As more and more of us start connecting and making this choice, and society is based on agreement. When we all agree, when we all agree to live in that state of being, we start to create our society, and we move away, and the old ways of being dissolve, and we move into this new way of being as we connect and we talk about it. So, again, like that's what's interesting for me. I have cryptocurrencies. It's not what I've dedicated my life to, but I like going to the different conferences because I meet people there who are always thinking it's like a network, it's a hub for people who are very interested in changing the consciousness on the planet and are looking for solutions.
Right.
And I love solution-oriented people who are in action and who want to be better people internally as well. And I find a lot of those people in the crypto communities.
Yeah, solution-oriented. I feel like that's part of the abundance mindset.
It's so simple, and I think we forget, we get wrapped up in all this stuff that's going on and these ideas, and like, I think it's so simple if we just remember that the solution is really loving ourselves.
Yes.
Living in the vow of wealth or the abundance matrix is truly unconditionally loving yourself, loving you, me, I, we, us, all.
Exactly.
That's all it is.
Yep.
So really just taking that very simple idea and embodying it and reminding each other constantly.
I'm really interested in talking about, and I teach this a lot, I know you guys have been talking about it, is what are ways that you can tell quickly when you're in a mindset of lack versus abundance, because the way of navigating abundance is so much different. And when we're in lack, we're in a lack mindset, the energy is completely different. The resonance in our body's different. So when we can get familiar with making decisions based on an abundant mindset versus a lack mindset, I think that really helps us navigate the reality. So I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think for me, when it comes up, I'll get a trigger and feel it, and working through that is, sometimes it can last, I know we talked about it during my session, sometimes it can last for hours or even days. It can be like this broken record playing over and over. But keeping tools and notes around my house, or messages on my phone, or calling my best friend and saying, hey, this is going on, this is what's happening for me, and having knowing where you can go to remind you to get back, whatever gets you back into that space.
Yeah.
Those reminders. And I also like to work with the practice of forgiveness. Like really forgiving myself, allowing myself to have those thoughts or those triggers, and then forgiving myself and forgiving humanity, forgiving all of us.
Yes.
On all the levels. Forgiving the people that somehow created this matrix that we're living in, forgiving whatever those beings or entities or what it is, forgiving it and really loving it and letting it go. And I think the more that we do that and get into that practice, that we really will just fully embody heaven on earth.
Exactly.
And that abundance matrix will be all over.
Yeah, I think forgiveness is absolutely key. It's an essential part of abundance, because if we're in a state of unforgiveness, we're not forgiving ourselves, and therefore we withhold love from ourselves, and when we withhold love, we withhold abundance.
Cycle.
Yeah. So forgiveness is key. Yeah, and we talked about that. I think one of you brought it up earlier in the conversation, the idea that when we're in inner conflict with ourselves, or even in inner conflict with humanity itself, and that's a big conversation going on right now, because we're afraid of what we've created, what we've done in survival. There's a lot of shame and guilt and fear, which I think those are the three emotions that control the lack matrix. And so
Fear and greed.
Exactly.
I would have to add greed.
Yeah, greed's
Greed
greed.
in almost every capacity I experience and see people having that. And I think it's okay.
Yeah,
I really,
because it comes from
the
lack.
more that I forgive, I realize it's okay, this is the experience that we're having at this moment. And it's not permanent.
Exactly, yeah.
Also, I want to come back to what you were just saying, but I first want to comment what you're saying about it being okay. In all my years of doing energy work, judgment creates a block.
Yes.
And the forgiveness aspect is that you can literally move into a neutral zone. When you have judgment, you're not neutral. If you have an emotional charge, you are actually being controlled by something outside of yourself.
Yes.
Whether it's a story that somebody else told you, a story you told yourself, the way that you're reacting and triggered to how somebody else is acting, you're not actually in full control of yourself. So learning to fully release judgment of something being good or bad and letting it be as it is the ability to be fully abundant. And as the word forgiving is literally forgiving.
Yeah.
When you're fully abundant, or think of Lakshmi, the goddess of abundance, she just has coins, coming from her hands and water flowing from her, that we're just this effervescent fountain of being able to give and give and give.
Yes.
And I believe that the people who are truly making the change in the world now are those who have been able to feel so abundant that they choose love over the emotions that we've talked about. Anger is also a big one.
Yes.
So if someone's angry or has a judgment around something and they bring that energy, depression, anger, fear, guilt towards you, usually if we don't have good control of ourselves, we'll meet them and bring more of that energy, and then we're creating that energy and fueling and feeding the system that we don't actually want to.
Yeah.
So when we can actually learn to love ourselves so much and live from the intention of love, that when any of those energies come to us without judgment, it's not that the anger is bad, it's not that this is bad, we can love it, and then we transmute it into love. Now we're fueling that love.
Exactly.
And we're literally transmuting energy that we're choosing to have less of in the world to create the energy that we want more of in the world.
Right.
Which brings me back to your original question. For me, it comes down to asking myself, if I'm not sure, love or fear.
Yes.
When I go into a space and I'm not clear, I'll ask myself, what am I choosing from? Am I choosing from love, or am I choosing from fear?
Yeah.
And the fear can be so subtle. I'm going to take this job because I'm afraid I won't be able to pay my rent. Or I'm afraid, my parents won't love me if I don't go to medical school. Or I'm afraid.
You don't even be conscious of it.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the awareness. It's the process, and that's where we're going inside. We stop. We're in a society where we're so busy and we're so,
externalized. Everything is externalized.
Yeah. Like, let me even go to my phone and look up on Google to research this article about it, and let me just sit and ask myself what's really going on. And a basic question for everyone can be, it definitely has worked for me. I stop and I say, okay, what's running me right now? Fear or love? And if it's fear, I will sit there and just keep asking why? Why? What am I afraid of? What am I afraid of? Because when we actually can look at the fear actively, it's no longer subconsciously coming from the inside out to make us aware of it. So when we move into a place of understanding ourselves as creator, I believe we do that only when we take full responsibility for everything in our life, which is the ability to respond.
Yes.
And so in my choosing to do that, I notice when things are happening on an external level, it's leading me back inside to see what I haven't healed or what I haven't processed or what I haven't seen about myself yet. So every time I do that, and I say this to myself and I say this to friends, if something's happening on an external level, again, ideally without judgment, but I want to choose something different, I'll look what inside of me is choosing to create that thing externally.
Yes. Yeah.
And so we go back into the inner, and that even when you were talking about investing, that's literally, it's investing, it's investing inside yourself.
Yeah.
So I feel like what we're doing is going through this shift in models from our source energy and everything going out, and everything and advertising, all of it. I mean, when you really take the time to study the history of our culture, and I've been listening to Oliver Stone's An Untold American History, because you're just telling the history of World War II, and we really look, okay, we look at the larger arc of human evolvement, because even as us three women sitting here, I know I have to keep reminding myself that in 1975 a woman couldn't even get a credit card, right, without a male guarantor.
Yeah. We
didn't necessarily grow up with that. We grew up going to school and thinking this, and that there's so much evolution happening in humanity in a short period of time. But when we look at the bigger picture, humans on this planet did use force to colonize parts of the world and steal their resources, and that's how they control them. And now we're shifting out of that. Consciousness is shifting, and the material world is shifting around that consciousness, and that's why we're getting into technologies that allow us to distribute more evenly, allow like-minded people to find each other.
If we use them the right way, right?
Right.
If we really use them the right way. And Florence Shin talks about creating, everything comes from within instead of without, So once we really create that shift inside, then our external reality is going to change.
Well, and I think a big part of the conversation that my brain always goes to, because I like practical things in the sense of like, just purely from a physics standpoint, the electromagnetic field around our body is self-sustaining. Around any living organism, it's self-sustaining, and it all meets in the heart, and the heart is what fuels our existence. It's the first organ that's developed. And I feel like if we were taught from the time we were in elementary school about your electromagnetic field, because that is literally the living field around you that emits energy and attracts things to you, that is actually the technology.
Coming from the heart.
Exactly, from the heart. It's central, and it's also self-sustaining. Like, it is completely the nature of what we are is self-sustaining. So, but when we're coming, I believe the lack matrix is when the heart and the mind got separated. And so it's like the mind became in control because we're in survival. And the heart was more like second. The heart was broken, really. That's what happened. Like, the heart of humanity was broken. And so I feel like getting back, again, goes back to like restoring the heart, which is why it is all about the heart, and it's all about forgiveness, and it's all about loving ourselves, like you said. And if that piece isn't in it, true abundance can never be had. And I feel like more than that, we need to understand that we are the technology. And any technology that's created is a reflection of us. Because we created it, it means we are it.
Yes, we can't give it responsibility.
Exactly. So we can't give it power outside of us. And I believe there is a point to where, because part of navigating the world of abundance is writing synchronicity, because it's kind of how the world will naturally like how we naturally came together. We didn't have to sit and plan it. Well, I need to find someone who's in a cryptocurrency world. I had no idea that I was going to meet you guys, and I didn't even really know. I had heard about Bitcoin, but I didn't really know about cryptocurrency. And it had kind of been in my mind. I kept hearing Bitcoin, and I'm like, I know I'm going to have to look into that. But it wasn't any sort of thing that all of a sudden you just came into my reality. And anything that usually ever happens that's amazing, it's something that's not planned. It happens organically, and I feel like that's why trust is such a huge part of navigating abundance, and it's why it's so hard to overcome the program of lack, because we've been in survival mode. We haven't felt like our needs can be met, and for some people, like you said, look at our history, their needs haven't been met. So they're very real reasons, and we can't discount that, like you said. We can't discount
haven't
it.
been met, right? Because of the internal lack matrix that's being pushed out of people.
Exactly.
If you're emanating the abundance matrix, then the reality, your needs are met. It's
Exactly.
all mental.
Exactly, and that's about what it is, that all your needs are met. And like I've been saying, that we are ultimately a trinity, because we are mind, we are heart, and we are body, and that means all of us has to be taken into consideration. And in the lack matrix, it's usually the heart that gets put on the back burner. When it's ironic, the heart is central. Like, you can't really do anything. Like, the mind is so worshipped above the heart, and it's really meant to be the other way around. But the mind is the heart's servant. The mind creates the reality, the heart inspires, you know.
So as you're speaking, what it makes me think about, we have these statements that are buried throughout the English language, like listen to your heart. Why do we say that?
Exactly.
And in Chinese medicine, your heart's considered your emperor organ. It's also where your shen is housed, which is the part of your soul that knows why you incarnated onto this planet.
Interesting.
So what that made me think about is part of what's happened is to control the physical vessels that our souls are experiencing this reality in. Is a disconnection between our physical and non-physical self. And that disconnection from the heart is also a disconnection from the soul, our own inner connection, our inner knowing, our ability to listen to our heart. Mm-hmm. I believe very consciously that the non-physical aspect of reality was written out of our collective story around the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah,
because it's much easier to control the material world when people don't have the connection to their inner knowing. Mm-hmm. And then, as I was talking about with advertising, then it comes in, the part of us that feels so empty is the hook that we now get, like, boop, boop, come buy this, come buy that, come buy this, and then you get hooked into the system because you need to buy stuff, you need to create money, and your energy is being fed very deliberately by conditioning that the only thing that can make you happy is the material world. Mm-hmm. We've been programmed to not even necessarily believe in our non-physical aspects.
Yes, a lot of the programming too, which we haven't really touched upon, but you talk about the heart being broken, but the brain is really, the aspects of the mind are broken too. You know, we have the superconscious, the subconscious, and the conscious mind. And the subconscious mind, as Nada keeps bringing up marketing and advertising, that is how we are programmed.
Yes.
We are constantly programmed through the subconscious mind, and it speaks a different language than what we're speaking now in the conscious mind.
Exactly.
And then our superconscious mind, our higher selves, our God selves, that's a whole other language as well. So reconnecting those three and working with them, I guess they call it like a whole brain thinking, but utilizing those three parts and being aware and conscious of it, that is the shift too.
Yes.
So reconnecting those three parts and then reconnecting them with the heart.
Yes. And I think there's something so powerful about programming that we need to understand, because it's not that programming's wrong, we just have to know how to use it for our benefit versus like it being controlled by fear and lack. And that's the easiest thing to control, because everyone's afraid of death, everyone's afraid of things they love being taken from them, everyone's afraid of not having enough. And as you were saying, if we don't even have an understanding of our soul or our inner self, then that makes sense, because then it's only the material. And yet there's all these intangible things like love, like intimacy, that we can't necessarily like logically understand, but yet it is the heart of everything. Like, we have the matrix, but what fuels the matrix is the stories we tell and how we feel and how we connect, and that is a huge part of it. It is the essence, you know, and so I think that's an incredibly important part of the conversation.
I want to, when you were talking earlier about vows of poverty, I mean, for people, some people believe in reincarnation, some people do not, but people that do tend to see, I hear a lot of people say, well, I took a vow of poverty like what in my last life in this way, and that's why I have a hard time relating to material. I think it's important for people to remember that vows of poverty are taken to experience how the non-physical works.
Yes.
So when you do a practice like celibacy or abstinence of something in your life, it's to understand how that energy controls you. And a lot of aesthetics or monks do, it has a specific name which I can't remember at the moment, but basically take 3 to 9 years where they literally bring their bowl and they walk. And the reason you do that is because when you until you fully experience, it doesn't become a visceral truth for you. It can be a logical understanding, but when you actually experience something, it becomes real.
Yeah.
And when you literally start walking with the clothes on your back and a bowl, and you start seeing somehow magic happening, that there's always food for you to eat, there's always a place for you to stay, you start to have the experiential knowing that it's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
And
Trust.
that's a big part of the jump. Because I think I would literally always use the example in The Matrix of Keanu Reeves jumping over from one building to the next building. The first time he falls flat on his face because he doesn't have the ability to fully enroll himself emotionally and mentally that he's going to be able to do that.
Right.
But you keep jumping and eventually you make the jump, it becomes practice.
Yes.
So when you take some of those practices of poverty and you put them into alignment for what their true reason is for resisting, it's that you become so connected to your source energy and your ability to create. And here's the other thing, it's not your ego, since we're talking about this, it's not your ego personality's ability to create, it's your God self, or your more omnipotent self that's creating.
I think that the vow of poverty is separate, whereas you can use the vow of wealth to do all of those things. You can use the vow of wealth, which is what I do, to go inside, and I use the vow of wealth, not when I say wealth, I don't necessarily mean physical reality. I mean wealth as in my true essence, our true essence. That is the fabric of wealth.
Yeah.
So going in and experiencing that, you don't need to experience lack matrix, or poverty mindset, or taking a vow of poverty.
Exactly. I love that point. Actually, they're the same thing because true wealth is a state
It's a
of
choice.
being.
It's dualistic.
Yeah.
So you can choose to experience it this way, or you can choose to experience it this way.
Yeah.
Either way, it's the ability that things show up.
Yeah.
That
Exactly.
what you're always okay.
That we're the ones creating it. Yeah.
And it really shows that we're frequency resonators,
Yes.
So whatever is vibrating inside is going to emanate outside.
Exactly.
So if you choose to experience one thing, you're going to have that on the outside, and if you choose to experience another, that's what will emanate.
Right. Well, and also a big part of this too is that when our electromagnetic field is strong, when it's pulsating strong, which means we feel abundant, we feel powerful, that actually, just like a tuning fork, if you have a strong resonance, you tune the people around you versus them tuning you. But when you have a weak electromagnetic field, you're easily tuned to other people's frequency. And that's part of the conversation. It's so important that we feel abundant. And I think that goes back to what you were saying about it being an internal reality, where it's like a knowing and a trusting in that non-material aspect of
Well,
us.
it's just that you have to be careful. There's so many subtleties. And in Buddhism, they say that on the path to enlightenment, the hardest is as you get closest, because it's really easy to see the big boulders in your consciousness that it's time to remove or dissolve. But as you're doing the fine tuning, finding that grain of sand, we just want to be clear that as a full abundant being, we're aligned with the love and not the fear. That we're not creating the wealth because we're terrified of poverty.
Well,
So
that is poverty mindset. Creating wealth from a greed mindset is poverty mindset. That is lack.
Because it creates
So those
more
are
lack.
very different things. When you're creating from a space of true unconditional love, you are in the abundance matrix.
Yes.
So that's where people get abundance confused. We get it in our society. They're like, oh, abundance, I'm going to manifest. That is creating from a space of lack.
Yes. Yes.
And
100%.
Florence Shin also talks about how everything that we're supposed to have, we do have because it's divine will. And you don't need to try to manifest things out of in a forceful way. They will just come. If you're resonating in the space where you need to be, they will come to you.
Yes. Exactly.
And that is the true abundance matrix. So when people, not to discredit very hardworking people, but a lot of our programming is, work really hard, deplete your body,
sacrifice,
major sacrifice, but for mental, physical, and emotional health, out of alignment of the codes of nature.
Exactly.
And by doing that, you may accumulate lots of abundance in the physical world, and wealth and money, but that is still the lack matrix.
Exactly.
You're living in the lack matrix and you're creating from that space.
Yep.
So I think it's a great point to really have people remember that you want to be aware of where you're creating.
Yeah, and that abundance and wealth is not necessarily about money.
Even for me, it might, as much as I'm involved in the crypto community space, and all the activity that I do, every second of every day I have to remind myself, like, yes, this is great, this is awesome, and where am I creating from? How am I creating? Am I creating from the space that, like, I need to accumulate more wealth? Or am I creating from the space that, like, I already have all this wealth? I know that I have all the wealth of the world because I am all the wealth of the world.
Yeah.
And I'm creating from a space of the direction of where my soul needs to go and what I'm here to do on this planet.
Yeah. I think a big part of that is when you know your worth and you know your value, you create from that space. Whereas a lot of, I think, the old mindset and the lack mindset in the wealth, like in the creating money world, comes from having to prove your worth.
Yes.
Like, I have to prove that I'm worthy. And I think that's another way to tell whether you're creating from lack or abundance. Like, is this coming from a sense of needing to prove myself, or is this truly coming from an inspiration, like true inspiration in my heart because I love it? And I feel like people underestimate their true loves. Because when you truly love something, even if you can't comprehend how you could make money off of it, again, synchronicity takes over because the heart is magnetizing. It magnetizes 5,000 times more than the brain. And that's scientifically proven. So, like, you are literally 5,000 times more powerful when you come from your heart versus your mind.
I always like to talk about this concept and idea of you don't need to go out and create and, everything you need is here.
Yeah.
We're breathing air. It's free. Your existence, you didn't have to do it. It's the flow. It's like the divine essence and the flow of that.
Yes, yeah.
So remembering that is really important.
Yes. Remembering that there's trillions of cells in our body that are thriving to that I can actually talk to you without literally consciously going, I will now open my mouth to say this word. And for me, it is a practice to stay in the resonance of abundance and the resonance of love, especially when you start plugging into the media or you look at certain things going on. Because even as we're having this discussion here, I look at like some of the stories of immigrants who literally are making $3 an hour,
exactly.
And how do we apply this to them, right? It's easy. For whatever reason that I was born in the way that I am, that I can be sitting here and the choices I made that allow me here, whatever mental programming I was given, that I could sit here and have this conversation. And then how I resolve that is that I expand it into the larger human consciousness. That is, I at least focus on myself, do the best to enlighten myself and to live in that vibration, that I can help share it with more people so that we can help each other and include everyone in the world.
That's a big part of it.
And when I sometimes...
That's how you change the world, just at an individual level. People, I know so many people that are like, I'm going to change the world, I'm going to do this, and inside of themselves they're in the lack matrix, and they don't fully love themselves, they haven't, so you can't change the external when you haven't changed the internal.
Exactly.
That internal shift has to take place, and then the external is a reflection of that.
Right. And if each individual person, especially those of us who can, that are not as vulnerable as some others, when we take the fact that our privilege, or whatever you want to call it, and take full responsibility for ourselves and realize that the more abundant we are, and abundant everywhere, every way, physically, mentally, emotionally, it teaches, and it's that whole resonance thing again. The stronger our resonance is, we create that resonance on the planet, and that is how physics works.
Yep.
And also, as we understand ourselves and identify with the infinite aspect of our being, that's for me always the place that I go to. Because when I think that there's a problem or an issue, I remember that we have infinite consciousness, which means there's infinite solutions, and there's infinite creativity to shift anything instantaneously.
Yes.
So the best that I can do is practice that within myself, exemplify it in my own life, and then lead as an example. Because as I start to actually believe that I can do it, not just on a logical level, because I start to see it through the synchronicities, and you start to expand and know yourself as this flow within the universal consciousness, you start to enroll people that already get that, which magnetizes and makes it stronger and builds the network or the community like we were talking about earlier.
Exactly.
And you give faith to people who might be watching us talk and go, I'm terrified. This is, I have 2 kids at home and I don't know that I could just not go to my job.
Exactly.
Like, how can I have the faith that I'm going to be okay?
Well,
when everything, externally tells me I'm not.
Exactly.
And also internally.
Exactly.
But really, the practice of the internal, like you said, really identifying and embodying, connecting to that infinite source, that's the answer.
And
Well,
hearing
and
people's
it's
stories
simple.
that have already done it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Finding role models, finding people you want to model after who you've seen have maybe a similar story to you and have plugged into that system.
And identifying, I mean, I think even, I've seen it in my own mother. The practices that I've been embodying and enabled in my life, she has too, and I'm watching the changes and the shifts happen so drastically as another living proof outside of myself that it really is. It's just identifying when you find those little spaces and places of lack and then saying, okay, nope, I don't choose that, I choose this. It's as easy as that, and then your external reality starts to shift.
Yes. And I think a big part of what's really important for everyone to know, like no matter where they are, is that finding what you actually truly, genuinely care about and love. It's so important to bring that online, even if it doesn't make logical sense. Like, I don't see how I can make money from that, but we have to have our hearts, and also our lower chakras are involved in the material world, and fear, guilt, and shame block the lower chakras. So having guilt about your desires, having fear about being physical, and having shame about your personal power is what keeps us in lack. And so I think it's so important to find anything you love, anything but love. Like love, creation is a big part of this. I think our sacral chakra is the fuel. Like to have a new system, we have to create it. To be something, we have to create, and the lack matrix is ultimately at its core destructive, and that's why people get hopeless, and it all becomes about focusing on the problem. But if we focus on what we love, even if it feels disconnected from the big problem that maybe you can't do anything specifically about, if you find a way to love and create, you're doing far more for the planet than you could be if you're just focusing on the problem.
I want to speak to that in the context of blockchain technology, because everyone that is creating, not everyone, but the majority of the people, especially the early adopters and founders that have been creating in the space, are creating it from a place of love. And when I share the information of this technology with people, they're like, oh, this is nonsense, it's crazy. It's magic internet money, it doesn't make sense. But it's just another way to prove that in our reality we can create things that may not make sense, and there's an infinite way to create. So you were speaking about earlier that maybe you have an idea and you want to do something, but you don't see how it's going to profit you. Mm-hmm. These people that created this technology did not do it from a place of profit at all.
That's interesting.
And now it's creating wealth for so many people that, I know multi-millionaires now that had maybe a few $100s to their name years ago. People that I have faith in humanity, but these people that probably would never have been millionaires in any other way.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's really opening up doors and opportunities for people.
Well, the internet in general, I think it's given a platform for people to just kind of obsess about what they love, and often they'll end up making a ton of money with, like, that wasn't their intention. They were just doing something they loved, and wealth or abundance came from it. So I think that we should definitely continue this conversation and have many more, and even just the way it's happened exactly is what we've been talking about. Like, it happened organically, it wasn't planned, we all showed up, we all had to get over our whatever, you know what I mean? Even I had my own, what if we're not, what if it doesn't work, whatever, you know what I mean? But it's really cool to actually see it. Yeah, it's really cool to see it. So
I'd love to continue the conversation.
Yeah.
Really expand on all of these ideas and thoughts.
Agreed. Yeah. Anything else?
I love you!